Hello everybody, and welcome again back to my channel. I know it's been a bit of a content drought for the last month, and I apologize for that because I have been buried in the game New World. So I'm not gonna, elaborate on that. I'm addicted to MMOs. Anyway, um, before I say anything, please like and subscribe if you like my content. Please follow me on Twitch at So Say We All. Follow me on Instagram at So Say We All. I try to do my best to get back in touch with people who leave comments. I know I've been a bit wishy-washy lately, and I apologize, but work is work. Retail sucks. So, as you can see from the background image, this is going to be my review for Dune 2021. Now, I want to preface this by saying that I'm a person who really loves cult sci-fi films that fail at the box office. Dune of the 80s was a prime example of that. Movies like Event Horizon are movies that strike a chord with me because they take risks and they don't toe the Hollywood line. Dune is notorious for being an incredibly hard work to adapt to movies. Arguably, Dune fits better formats. And as David Lynch learned, he, while in my view did not fail at adapting Dune to a movie, suffered the backlash of Hollywood's ongoing risk aversion. So I was really hesitant going into seeing what is another arguable remake because Hollywood is creatively bankrupt. We don't get new IPs. They are very risk averse. As we see is we're getting another Matrix movie at the end of this year. Why? So I tried to go in this with open eyes and casting away my bias for what's been going on in Hollywood lately. So we get to the screenwriter cinematographer of Dune 2021, Denis Villeneuve. Arguably one of the greatest cinematographers of my generation. Now, I want to be clear on this. Here is my problem. His masterpiece so far was Blade Runner 2049. Arguably a bloatedly long movie, but cinematically breathtaking. He suffers exactly what somebody like J.J. Abrams does. Amazing cinematographer, horrible screenwriter. So, when I saw who was co-writing Dune with Danny, I already began developing my own biases. Because on one hand, you had a screenwriter that was responsible for amazing movies like Forrest Gump. But on the other hand, you had somebody that was responsible for movies like Prometheus and Passengers. So immediately, I was concerned. Because if Danny is carrying the weight of cinematography in the movie, how much is his narrative vision for the movie going to be his own, and how much of it is going to be offloaded onto the other two screenwriters? Well, as I watched this movie, it became very clear that Dune's script is its greatest weakness. Now, I'm not a lore whore, but Dune has a very complex and evolved lore that you kind of need to get key notes from to understand the story, understand the stakes, and understand the relationships going on. The things that they chose, to either omit or blatantly simplify for an audience. I mean, I understand the fear was probably if they make this too complex for a general audience, they're just not going to get it. And fair enough, but maybe you shouldn't treat your audiences as being stupid. This isn't rocket science. Dune, for all of its grandiosity and its use of real world politics being guilds and political intrigue. It's much in the way in the games of Game of Thrones. The layman's term of calling Dune Game of Thrones in space is very adept, because it does have that level of political scheming and intrigue and interrelationships that are key to what makes Dune amazing. I really encourage you, if I remember, I'll put the link at the bottom of this video, to look at the video of the 30,000 year history of Dune. It condenses the Dune timeline into something much more digestible for people who have not read the books. Now, this is where people argue, well, you can't take the source material that is 500 plus pages long and make a good movie out of it. Stephen King did it. Cujo, Christine, Carrie, Firestarter. Books that easily eclipsed 800 pages in some cases were made into some of the best screenplays I've ever seen. But Dune leaves out the importance of space folding, the expulsion of AI. Arguably, the 90s sci-fi series did better at this. And this is where, I hate to say it, but Dune would have thrived a lot better in another format. And I'll go into that in a little bit. So, then we get to the cast. Dune has a stacked cast. And again, that's not necessarily a good thing. There is a notable lack of meaningfully established relationships in the movie. And again, 80s Dune did this better. There is a horrendous lack of chemistry with Timothée Chalamet and the people playing his parents. Now, arguably, the big exception of this is Rebecca Ferguson. She does an amazing portrayal, a connected, emotional portrayal of Paul's Bene Gesserit mother, Lady Jessica. She should get an Oscar for this role, and unfortunately, she will be passed over. She will be passed over. Timothée Chalamet's acting is cardboard. I did not like him in Say My Name. Arguably a role that you didn't need much acting credo for, and his acting in this is cardboard. And a lot of the people who should have been meaningful relationships were disposed of way too fast in the movie to push the plot along. This is a weakness of script writing. It's not good. So then we have the villains, the Harkonnens. And again, the 80s movie did a wonderful job of exposing how disgusting and violent and immoral the Harkonnens were. They were intergalactic pedophiles and murderers. They were gross. They had no morality. Nothing was beyond the pale for them. In this movie, they don't feel like a threat. They are very quickly used as a plot device to lead to a battle, to push the plot along, to push Paul out into the desert. The 80s movie did this so much better. And arguably, the other thing that the movie did better than the 80s movie, and arguably the sci-fi series did better than this movie, was make the Fremen more relatable. The actors that portray the Fremen in this, including Javier Bardem, are freaking excellent. The Emperor's ecological, I want to say representative or progenitor, I forgot exactly what her term was an amazing duplicitous Fremen. She was freaking great. She should have had a much more significant role in the movie. But one of the things that they did really horrible was the depiction of a betrayal, and I'm not going to spoil it for anybody who's not ever watched Dune, but they minimized the betrayal of a certain character in this movie that had a significant effect on Paul, the way he viewed people, the way he viewed relationships with people, and this was so quickly disposed of, and it was just like, wait, what? Why is this guy doing this? Who is he? And it was just like, okay, the poor script beats, the need to quickly jump away to certain things that I guess Villeneuve felt were more important to get the film to hit certain beats so that we're setting things up for part two. And I don't know. I'm questioning whether this was an editing issue or a script issue. So then we're going to get onto the score. Now Hans Zimmer is no lightweight in terms of scoring movies. Hans Zimmer is freaking top-notch tier. The use of excessive subtlety in this was kind of a detriment. It was it immerses you, it puts you in a zone, but that zone makes you kind of just feel disconnected from choices going on in the movie and the stakes in the movie. And there were times in the movie where I expected bombast. I did not want this to be a Hollywood popcorn flick. Don't misinterpret what I'm saying here. I did not want this to be a Michael Bay explosion fest. No. This movie requires depth and immersion, but to the point where you're literally nodding off was a detriment to the film. Some of this needed to feel risky and bombastic and universe spanning. The Imperium spans hundreds of planets. You did not get that scope with the script writing and the score. The score did not feel big, and it should have in many ways. So then we also get to an issue, and this is something that's been happening a lot in Hollywood movies: the audio mixing with dialogue. If I am whispering like this, you should still be able to understand me. Outside of the soundtrack, outside of environmental audio, you should still be able to understand what I'm saying, especially if that dialogue is integral to something going on in the plot. And many a times in this movie, if you're hard of hearing, if you weren't listening on headphones, if you were in a theater that had a notable bassy sound system, most of the basic talking like this was hard to understand if there was soundtrack layered behind it. That's another poor choice. So now I come to something that I came into realization with when you deal with source material that has a scope this large. This is why The Expanse was developed for television and not movies. Dune should be a Game of Thrones-esque 5 to 10 year streaming project. Strictly streaming, with maybe movies interspersed to hit historical notes. So maybe we could have gotten the wars that gave us the Imperium, the AI, the evolution of AI and the Silicon Death, and the rise of the navigators and space folding. This could have been handled in a much greater scope, but the problem is this is in the hand of Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers, while they have the resources to do this, have always lacked commitment. You see this in the way they're handling the DC universe in cinema. They're just trying to play catch up to another IP. And I'm nervous. I'm very nervous right now because this is a part one. We haven't really seen a commitment, although media seems to be implying that Warner Brothers has greenlit part two. But as of today, Dune 2021, with both screening and streaming, has netted $135 million worldwide. Its budget is $165 million. We're in week one. As we've seen throughout the year, most movies have a horrendous second week because we don't have the movie audiences going back into theaters, and arguably the movie theater experience has degraded so much, and I'm saying this from the United States, that most of us would much rather watch this at home. Much to the detriment, because I'm sure visually in IMAX, this movie is amazing. But it does not, the visuals will not make up for the oversimplification, the lack of character relationships, the bloating of a cast with people that are disposed of way too soon. You don't get the significant relationships in this movie at all. Rebecca Ferguson sells this movie. It is her relationship with Paul and the things that she hid from him to fulfill a prophecy that are much more relevant than most of the rest of the movie. You arguably could have just shown the battle that put them in the desert and started the movie there, and just backlogged it with a whole mess of details and exposition and flashbacks, and it maybe would have been a better movie. I honestly do not know. Arguably, it probably wouldn't have been, but this is the problem with Dune, because every director that gets their hands on Dune has a problem coalescing the significant parts of the lore and the history of Dune into something that's digestible in a 2.5-hour movie. It does not work. Dune is not designed for movies. It is not a cinema experience. Arguably, with the advent of streaming, we are in an age where you get The Expanse. They're rebooting Babylon 5. Projects that have a 5-year scope are not meant for cinema. You cannot condense the political interminglings and the long story arcs of familiar character interrelationships and political scheming. Sometimes you cannot do that in 2.5 hours. So, am I nervous about getting a part 2? Well, Warner Brothers is in a really awkward position because lately their properties have been losing money at theaters. If Dune makes its budget back, who knows? But I'm sure Warner Brothers is looking for that $500 million windfall, and they're not going to get this. Dune 2021 is going to struggle to hit that $500 million mark. I'm saying it right now. This is not a movie for everybody. It's slow, it's plodding, and not many people are going, after being locked away for almost a year, are going into a theater wanting a slow and plodding experience. That's what they got on streaming services. That's why certain shows on streaming services did exceptionally well, because people had all this time at home to enjoy a evolving storyline that spanned across 3 seasons. It's why a number of shows that didn't fare well on television suddenly are doing extremely well on streaming services. One of my favorite shows, The 100, is doing extremely well now on streaming services. In fact, oddly enough, better than it did on television. And you see that with Star Trek, and you see that with a number of series that didn't really fare that well on television. So, I'm wrong. I'm nervous. I am nervous that Warner Brothers is not going to get their $500 million windfall. They're going to get nervous about committing to doing a part 2. And arguably, you're probably going to lose Danny Villeneuve. You're going to lose him for part 2. So then Warner Brothers is going to scramble around for another director, and Warner Brothers' history with directors and casts and crews is very public lately. They have a problem getting actors and directors to work with them because they're ham-fisted, controlling, and they don't want to let directors evolve their vision into something that audiences arguably want. The Snyderverse is a very, big example of this. While it had its flaws, the audience wanted this darker, adult, mature version of DC, and Warner Brothers wanted to choke it off and turn it into a Marvel clone. So my final verdict is I'll score Dune three ways. Cinematography is a 10. This is a 10. This is one of the most gorgeously filmed movies behind the recent Star Wars movies. Cinematography is amazing. Score, for me, is a 5. And I'm a huge fan of Hans Zimmer, but the excessive subtlety in this movie in terms of sound denigrated some of the important parts of the movie. And 3, cast. Arguably, I can't rate the cast's performances for the most part because they're disposed of so expeditiously. Paul's father, Paul's bodyguard military advisor, his father's military advisor, the doctor, most of the supporting cast are all disposed of within the first 45 minutes of the movie, to the detriment of the film. And what you're left with are the Fremen, who are very well done, Paul, Timothée Chalamet, who's acting as cardboard and really disaffected, and Rebecca Ferguson as Lady Jessica, who deserves an Oscar for this role. And she will be passed over. This movie will probably be passed over and just get the cinematography and the score Oscars and probably effects. So cumulatively, I think this is a 7. I probably won't watch it again. That's how little weight this had with me. I'll probably go back and watch Dune 1980 version and probably dig up the sci-fi series and maybe go through it again. Because as I've had time over the last 15 years to get more immersed in the Dune history, in the Dune lore, and understand the type of novelization, sci-fi and fantasy that I like more, arguably the Battlestar Galacticas, the Dunes, the Expanses, I'm going to go back and re-immerse myself in this and hope to God that Warner Brothers does not drop the ball. I'm worried in the hands of any other studio, this may have had a better future. But with Warner Brothers, their recent financial failures, their horrible history with rapport with directors and casts, I'm nervous. Warner Brothers is going to be the linchpin in all of this. And I'm also worried that how much are you going to alter the tone and the direction of the first movie for the second part? Because the second part, you're going to have to ram in a plethora of plot points and notes from the history of Dune and condense it into what? Another 2.5 hour movie? Because I'm sure if Denny sticks around for this and does a 3.5 hour movie, Warner Brothers is going to bulk. They bulk at anything that, doesn't seem like it's digestible for audiences in a cinema. So yeah, for me, Dune is a 7. Do I recommend you watch it at least once? Yes. If nothing, to get intrigued. If you're somebody who has never watched Dune, has never read the book, has never done any research about Dune, this is a good entrance point for newbies, for neophytes. If you're somebody who has never really delved into a property that has a deep lore, if you've never really delved into Star Trek or delved into Star Wars, this would be your entrance point. This would be a great way to sit down and say, hey, what is this? What are the machinations going on in this? And then do more research, because there's plenty, absolutely plenty of great source material. The books, the follow-up books, the sci-fi series, the 80s movie, so much. Documentaries, there's so much out there, and I will link that 30,000 year history video at the bottom of this video. I encourage you to watch it. It's digestible, and it makes sense to know the underpinnings of what Dune is, because Dune has much in the way of like Lord of the Rings has has a parallel to the way things have happened in our world, the way we have treated ethnic minorities for resources, the way we engage in political scheming between empires and countries. There's so much relevance, and it's grounded in a sense of reality that if you can divorce sci-fi and actual writing, actual real world parallels, and look at them independently and then fuse them back together and understand how great they work together. How you can take thousands of years of human history and apply them to a future world and they happen the same way because humans are habitual creatures. I would recommend this movie as a watch to introduce you to the source material. Are you going to be mind blown? No. It's going to pique your interest. That being said, once again, please like, follow, subscribe. I will do my best to bring more content. I'm currently working on maybe something for No Man's Sky. I've been avoiding doing New World because New World is not in a state for me to make a fully positive video, and I'm not at endgame yet to really get my sense of whether or not I would ever recommend it. But once again, thank you so much for watching this. I know it may have been long. I appreciate your comments below. Don't hesitate. I will get back to you now that work hasn't, completely killed me. Thank you once again.